can come join us. Yeah, she's part of the team. Dana? Great. Tell me when y'all are ready. Today, I'm joined by Madison Kuklinkski, a detective from the Elizabethtown Police Department, as well as the Attorney General's SAKI team. Since my first day in office, I have dedicated this office for standing up and protecting Kentuckians who have been denied justice and need our help the most. For far too many Kentuckians, justice has eluded them for years or for decades. That's why we made getting justice for victims of rape and sexual assault one of our top priorities of this office. We have battled Kentucky's rape culture on a number of fronts. We committed $1 million to providing critical training to law enforcement and prosecutors to seek justice for victims of sexual assault. That training focuses on victim-centered investigations where we are always putting that victim and their needs first. We've held forums on university campuses all over this Commonwealth encouraging active bystanding. In other words, stepping in and ensuring a situation never escalates to that traumatic level. We're standing up to Washington, D.C. as they try to roll back Title IX protections for our victims. And we've even sued Kentucky public universities when they are unwilling to be accountable for assaults that have occurred on their campus. We created the Attorney General's Survivors Council, a group of survivors of violent crime, to advise my office. They have made sure that we not only walk the walk, but they have made such amazing accomplishments in front of the General Assembly. Members of that Survivors Council passed Jenna's Law to make sure that no one could claim there was consent when the perpetrator was 20 years sometimes older than the victim. One of our Survivors Council members also pushed the bill that outlawed child marriage in Kentucky. They're an amazing group of people. Just last month, we announced the Office of the Attorney General would be the first state government office in Kentucky to train all of our employees on the Green Dot Active Bystander Program to help prevent and report sexual assault and harassment in our communities. But when we look at efforts to change the rape culture that exists in Kentucky, I believe one of our most important efforts has been how we've addressed Kentucky's rape kit backlog. Before 2016, we had over 3,000 untested sexual assault forensic kits sitting on shelves, some of them decades old or older. And they weren't just boxes. Each one represented a survivor of a horrendous crime that the justice system had forgotten and people had tried to forget. So immediately, we took steps to right this. First, we worked with advocates, survivors, and the General Assembly to pass the SAFE Act to mandate that all SAFE kits are submitted and tested in a timely manner. Second was the day that a survivor came into this office, pressed a button on a computer, and transferred over $4.5 million to our state crime lab because that was every dollar they claimed they needed to hire more people, buy more equipment, and do the training to ensure that this backlog would never occur again. But in 2017, we announced perhaps our most important step, that we are creating a cold case unit inside the Attorney General's office to seek justice for those who are a part of this backlog. Because simply testing these kits is not enough. We must seek justice to those that have been harmed. I'll never forget the day that we announced with Tom Wine the first indictment coming out of that backlog. It was about a rape that occurred in 1983. That showed you that justice can come for all of us if we never stop trying. This cold case unit has worked with law enforcement all across Kentucky, whether it is LMPD, whether it's down in McCracken County, or whether it's been with Hardin County. They're actively involved in assisting law enforcement and investigations, assisting survivors, making sure we have a victim's advocate to be there to help walk that individual where this is going to resurface that trauma through the process and to let them know that we are going to seek that justice. Last August, we announced what at the time was the third indictment coming out of this backlog of a Jefferson County man in an alleged 2005 sexual assault in McCracken County. Our cold case unit, who are up here with us today, worked with local law enforcement and prosecutors in McCracken County to finally get justice for that victim 13 years later. That justice would not have been possible without this hardworking team. Today, we're here to announce more good, more justice coming out of the cold case unit and of our dedicated local law enforcement. Earlier today, a Hardin County grand jury returned a 4-count indictment against a Hardin County man for a 2011 sexual assault. My office began investigating the 2011 sexual assault after the Elizabethtown Police Department turned it over to us as a cold case. The victim's sexual assault kit was unmatched. The case had gone cold until testing that began as part of the safe kit backlog was uncovered in 2015. DNA from the backlog, from a kit in that backlog, which was matched to an individual, allowed us to match the alleged perpetrator in this case, leading to the indictment. So this morning, Thaddeus Artis, 37, was indicted by a Hardin County grand jury. He was charged with first-degree rape, first-degree sodomy, intimidating a participant in a legal process, and being a persistent felon in the first degree. These are Class A and D felonies. Artis is in custody at the Marion County Detention Center, currently on unrelated charges. We are now working to support the victim who has waited almost a decade for this justice. We could not have done this alone. Cold cases are difficult, and they take everyone coming together. It takes dedicated partners like those in Hardin County to put these criminals behind bars and get someone justice who's been denied it for far too long. This indictment and steps towards justice for the victim would not have been possible without the assistance of the Elizabethtown Police Department, of the Radcliffe Police Department, and of the Hardin County Commonwealth Attorney's Office. While this indictment will never erase the trauma for the survivor, that you can never eliminate the trauma that is caused by such a horrific crime, we hope it will assist in the healing, that seeking justice even this long after the crime can provide some help in moving that victim back to that place of prosperity. We stand ready to help anyone else in any other jurisdiction working to right one of these wrongs. We are proud to champion a broad criminal justice response in addressing Kentucky's response to the sexual assault backlog. And we're here to help victims, to help law enforcement, to help prosecutors in every single corner of the state. This backlog was a historic wrong all over the country. They've called it a national health crisis in different circles. But the way we have addressed it here in Kentucky, where everyone has come on board, and where we have worked day in and day out, not just to test the kits, but to finally get the justice, the indictments, and the convictions that are necessary, I think we as a state should be very proud of that. So I want to thank the Hardin County Commonwealth Attorney, Shane Young, and his staff, the Elizabethtown and Radcliffe Police Departments, and the KSP Crime Labs. Together, by making sure that we pursue every single one of these cases, I believe that we can ultimately change and end Kentucky's rape culture. I'm happy to take any questions. Yes?
Your unit investigated it. Will you be prosecuting, your office be prosecuting, or will the Hardin County Commonwealth?
Our office is prosecuting it. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office in Hardin County turned the case over to us. So we were directly involved in the indictment and will be handling the prosecution. And while we investigated it, it was certainly in concert with Elizabethtown and with Radcliffe Police Departments, and could not have done it without their great detectives.
So this makes 4 you've gotten out of this batch, correct?
Well, we believe the current count of total indictments to come out of the backlog to date, and we're verifying it, is 7. There have been 2 that the cold case unit is directly working on, and then providing support on others. We have. Yes.
And could you just talk about the response maybe to that?
Sure.
You know, to be kind to her privacy, I will decline to do that, but I will say that she was happy to see that we were able to move forward for her.
And addressing this backlog was always the right thing to do, but I will say that I had a moment about 3 weeks ago that added more meaning to it. I was at the Center for Women and Families, Women of Distinction, sitting at a table sponsored by a woman who had been the victim of sexual assault herself. Her perpetrator was the first person indicted in the rape kit backlog 20 years or so before her assault. That if we had addressed the rape kit backlog at that time, that this person might not have been victimized. And so by changing the way we go about this, by ensuring that there's never a backlog again, by going through all of these kits and seeking justice, hopefully we can make sure that we catch these serial rapists before they can ever harm anyone else again.
When you say, you mentioned 7 now, when you say if there are other cases that are close to being broken because of this evidence?
Oh, across the Commonwealth, there are cases that are moving forward. When you look at the process that's required here, first in the kits, what had to be done is they had to see if they could extract DNA. If they could extract DNA, they then put it into the system to see if there is a profile. If there is a profile, it then takes opening an investigation, which is a cold case. The victim may have moved. It may be difficult to find some of the witnesses, and so that's a process that you have to go through that may be more difficult than other processes, but we have great detectives both here in the AG's office and in Elizabethtown in this instance that are working through it. And then at that point, you have to put the case together from the prosecutor's standpoint. So while it takes time, the fact that we now believe there are 7 shows that we are at that point in the backlog where you are going to see more and more and more indictments. And it's not just ones that we'll have a profile on now. By getting all of these kits and all the DNA into the system, if someone is arrested for a different crime, for a felony right now, and DNA is taken from them, it may tie them to that kit that is now in the system that otherwise wouldn't have been. So we expect to see the numbers pick up over time and ultimately solve a number of these cases.
Do you expect to connect Thaddeus to any other assaults?
At the moment, this is the only indictments coming out. There is a separate case under investigation that is related to this one.
So, do you believe that he is a suspect in other rapes in Kentucky or in institutions?
Well, the facts underlying this case show that his DNA was connected to a backlog case. And was allowed us to identify in this 2011 case, so they're 2 separate kits, him as the alleged perpetrator. I can tell you that that older case is still under investigation.
Can you say when that's from and where?
At the moment, I think we cannot, based on the fact that it is still under investigation, and we want to make sure that we continue that investigation in the right way.
How long have you been in custody?
In Marion County?
I'm not sure. He is serving on unrelated charges in Marion County.
We can get you what those charges are, though. Those are public record.
When was he arrested? Like last month, a couple months ago?
We can get you that information. Crystal, do you have that from his? Here, can you? Okay. I'm just going to read you what we have from CourtNet, which is a publicly available source, and I can't attest to the accuracy of it. It looks like October of 2017 is when he was charged with his last sets of crimes. Possession of a defaced firearm, possession, first degree of methamphetamine, possession of marijuana, and drug paraphernalia, it looks like. Convicted felon in possession of a handgun. Those have been the preliminary charges from October.
You guys think if he was on the streets still around, he's somebody you consider a serial rapist?
Well, I think we have to get to the ultimate conviction to say that, but I can say that this rape kit backlog will identify dozens, if not hundreds, of serial rapists. That everywhere that that's gone through this process has identified and removed serial rapists from our communities, and I believe that these efforts absolutely will identify and remove serial rapists. I believe that one of the indictments coming out of the Jefferson County Commonwealth Attorney's Office was tied to 3 separate victims. The very first indictment that came out, we know of at least 2 victims. Sadly, Many rapists are serial rapists, which shows you the importance that we investigate and that we solve every single crime that we can so that there will not be another victim.
I just asked Crystal about Robert Brewer and today, and you guys didn't do that case, so you're not familiar with that case.
We'd have to look it up. I'm not familiar.
What detective was working on the case the longest with Thaddeus? Who's working on that the longest?
That would be Mr. Welch and Madison.
Just in terms of how long have you been on the case, and do you ever get to a point where it's just, I know you guys get the calls from victims who say, what are you doing? And can you talk about that, just getting this closure after so many years and how long you've been working on it? Could you step to the podium? Can
Yes,
you
sir.
say your name, please?
Detective Trevor Welch
With the Attorney General.
with the Attorney General's Office, Department of Criminal Investigations. I have been on the case since November. Prior to me, there was another detective who would have been working the case for maybe 6 months, longer than that, about 6 months. And your other question was how much closure did the...
Can you just talk about, getting the closure after, I thought maybe somebody had been on it for a couple of years because it happened in 2011.
It happened in 2011. Elizabethtown PD handled it. They did a good job. The problem was the victim in this case was legally blind at the time. Her eyesight has gotten a little bit better, but she was unable to identify any kind of a suspect, so she couldn't even give a good description of the perpetrator. So Elizabethtown kind of ran into and nothing came back on her DNA when they sent it in originally, because the second case hadn't been put into the system yet. So they basically ran out of leads, and it was basically in a pending position. So when the KSP lab actually got a hit from the backlog kit, we were able to tie the suspect to this crime. And then, so it's only been reinvestigated since, I believe, 2017 is when the second.
2018 is when the
Okay.
unit got it. 2018.
Who's the first phone call you made?
Well, we have a crime victims advocate who handles those types of things. She's not with us today, but that's who makes the original notification. But a detective and a crime victims advocate will go together and discuss the situation with the actual victim. In this case, the victim was pretty traumatized, and
Can you talk about Thaddeus, when and where you confronted him and what his response was?
yeah, no, sir.
Did somebody from Elizabethtown talk about this, again, this case and solving it and the closure?
I have actually not spoke with the victim personally. The original case originated before I even started policing in 2011, when the officer at the time, the detective's office at that time, ran out of leads. It ultimately went cold, and in early 2018 is when we got the kit back, and so we reopened the case, and that's when I received it. I had difficulty finding the victim in this case, and that at that point in time is when I contacted the Attorney General's office to ask for their help. But I have not specifically spoken with the victim, so I don't know how she's coping and dealing with all of this.
Just in your professional opinion, can you just talk about, when a case goes cold, how frustrating that is, and then when you get the closure, the relief? I mean, as General Beshear said, nothing will take away the pain, but it has to give you some sort of, reward to be able to say, he did this.
Oh, absolutely, and especially after so long. We don't have complete closure yet because we still have the court process to go through and whatnot. So pending that, we'll be able to tell exactly how good or we feel about it or whatnot. But just finding a new lead is always pretty incredible for us. So.
And all I'd add is these cases show you the importance of victims advocates in the system in general. that every violent crime is difficult, and the court process is so difficult to understand and to navigate, but especially when they are older and when they are cold, approaching a victim, talking to the victim, where that trauma resurfaces. While it never goes away, it certainly resurfaces. Having somewhere that's trained, that's able to put that survivor first is so important. And I hope we will continue, and Kentucky's going the right way, to invest in victims advocates, to ensure we can have as many out there all across the Commonwealth doing the good work that they do. Well, on the historic backlog, Kentucky has now reported testing every single kit. Now, we are currently facing a delay in new kits that have been submitted, but those aren't a part of the historic backlog. So those 3,000 plus untested kits, they were never going to be tested until we started this process. And we now have every single one of those plus more in, because when we started this process, we wanted to go out and find every single one that was not scheduled to be tested, and those numbers got closer to 5,000 as we continued to do the testing. We were able to secure, with this SAKI grant that's allowed these great folks to work in the cold case unit, additional money to test those additional kits. And I'll tell you, ABC News did a national story on the backlog. They talked about it being a national health crisis, which it is, and they listed every state and their number of historic kits that had not been tested. There are only 2 states that have 0 untested kits, and Kentucky's one of them. We're pretty proud of that.
Have you seen, you may have heard about yesterday, over at the state lab, they have this new rapid DNA testing
Mm-hmm.
system they have, where the results come back in like 2 hours instead of
Right.
days or weeks or whatever. What will that mean from your side?
Well, from my understanding is that they're trying out some new technology, which we're for. We're for anything that can help us get justice and can help us get that justice as quickly as possible. Anytime we can remove a violent criminal, especially a rapist, from our community as quickly as possible, that means we could save other victims that are out there. And I was pleased to read about the indictment, because crime's not political. It'll harm you regardless of your party. All right? Thank you all very much.